Hello, chess lovers. At the moment, there is a tournament going on called Grand Chess Tour. It is played in several countries, and right now, the destination is Paris. Very interesting games there, and today I will be analyzing a game from round one between Bacrot and Rapport. So Rapport is the young guy, and Bacrot a little bit older, maybe even retired. I'm not sure. He used to be a prodigy many years ago. So let's check what happened in this very interesting game. So we have e4 c6, Caro-Kann defense, and now a knight f3. Very interesting move. Um, Not so popular, but actually quite good. I remember Tal played this move against Botvinnik maybe 80, no, 60 years ago. 60 years ago. All right, d5, and now Bacrot continues with knight c3. So this is exactly like Tal played. What is interesting here is that Alpha Zero likes this move. It can lead to an endgame where white loses the right to castle, but gets some strategical ideas that he can play for. All right, let's go back to knight c3, knight f6, and now we have e5. So the knight is attacked and it has to move. And now a normal response would be knight e4 because white cannot really take here. Knight e4, d4, because this f3 knight needs to move, and once it moves somewhere, the queen can come here and attack this pawn, which would be very uncomfortable for white. So that's why I was surprised that Rapport played knight h5. What is this move, man? You're putting your knight on a very strange spot, and once white plays d4 and takes away the f4 square, f6 square has been taken already in the past. He cannot go here, so he already has to worry about some ideas like this, and so the only place to run is here, but he first needs to make some space, so that's why he plays g6. But still, I mean, of course he is not lost or anything, but it's very provocative way of playing. Okay, let's see what happened. Let's see what happened. Now first knight e2. Why knight e2? So as you can see, this pawn cannot be protected by this guy. But when you go knight e2, now you have this option. And also when knight was on c3, it didn't really have many prospects. Everything was covered. But from e2, it has nice ideas. First, it supports the pawn, and maybe later it can go this way. All right. So Rapport immediately jumped back, knight g7, and we can see knight g3. So we found a new spot for the knight. Now this knight can support these ideas, or maybe later these ideas. Also, it controls these two squares, so it's not going to be so easy for black to use those squares. And black goes h5. Another provocative move, if you ask me honestly. So, what's the idea behind it? For me, it's hard to tell. But okay, maybe he would just want to preempt any ideas like this, and he himself might push the g3 knight later. Okay, so white develops bishop d3, and now bishop g4. So when you play a move like this, it's obvious that you want to give up this bishop for this knight. Maybe he just didn't want to block in his light square bishop, so he wanted to get rid of it before he goes for e6. All right, so white obliges, so he goes h3, and what can you do? What can you do with this guy? You cannot really go here, here, it's not so good, and if you go here, you just admit that your previous move was a total miss. So black exchanges, bishop f3, queen f3, and now a6, opening the bishop and supporting this pawn so that he can go c5 later. This is all good, but there is a slight problem in black's position, and that is the complex of dark squares is very weak. At the moment, the f8 bishop can be used to cover it, but who knows, in the future it might be a problem. Let's see, white just castled, and now black played h4. So I don't like this move, to tell you honestly. So first of all, white already wanted to reroute this knight, something like this, because it had fulfilled its role on g3. And then you, by attacking the knight, you're just encouraging it to go on with his intended maneuver. And secondly, black needs to start some counterplay, so a move like c5 would be in order, much more logical and much more required, right? So it's part of black's plan, and then you can continue putting pressure on the d4 pawn. All right, but he chose h4, and white just retreated. Now, if he needs to, he can go here. And also, another thing, now, because there is no knight on g3, white can go g4 and take control of these two squares. And if ever black takes, it will open up the f-file and a disaster might happen there. Something similar happens. The f-file doesn't get open, but white uses this fact to his advantage. So let's see, bishop e7 and an excellent move, g4. g4, why is this an excellent move? First of all, it controls f5 and h5, which makes this knight very stupid. So second of all, black cannot take right now, because after f takes g3, the f-file opens and black faces some problems. For example, if he blocks with knight f5, then after g4, white is attacking the f5 knight, and it cannot really move because then the f7 point would collapse. For example, knight h6, bishop h6, removing the defender of the f7 square, and game over. So actually there black has to give up the piece just to prolong the game. Okay, so after g4, taking here is impossible. So now black starts the counterattack, and this is a logical move, but it should have been played a few moves earlier, you know, instead of all this h4, bishop e7. He should have done it. He should have done it sooner. And now, very interesting move by white, d takes c5. So we take the pawn, and we take it by using the fact that recapturing is not the best way to go about it, because there is a when bishop was on e7, it was controlling f6, and now it's here, so white can use this to his advantage by playing queen f6 and attacking this knight. And you cannot really trade queens, because look, queen f6, ef6, and the knight has no squares. All the squares are unavailable to him, so it's just gonna drop. So that's why black cannot exchange queens, but he has to somehow protect this knight, and he has several moves of doing that. These are all the moves that can protect the knight, but none of them seems ideal. So if you do it with the king, you will never castle. If you do it with the bishop, you're just retreating your piece back to the 8th square. If you do it with the rook, it will be in an awkward spot. So whatever you choose, it's not what you want to do. So that's why black didn't recapture here, but instead played knight e7. And this is a nice move, because now it wants to capture here or here, and we don't want to allow that. So white pins the knight by playing bishop b5. So then capturing either of these by the knight, it's not possible. Black castles, so there is no more pin, but there is an option to trade. So we trade bishop d7, queen d7. Now a nice little move, c3. So again, white is banking on the fact that these these dark squares are weakened. So if, for example, black captures on c5, we plant our bishop on g5, and next we can put it here. It will be supported by the pawn, and the queen might find its way into the black's camp, a very unpleasant position. So that's why black did not recapture, but instead played queen c7. And it's a good move. It attacks two pawns and gives white a choice. Which pawn do you want to keep? Do you want to keep the e5 pawn or c5 pawn? Both of these options are good, so whatever white decides to do, it has good prospects, but it will be a different strategy. So if he keeps the c5 pawn, as in the game, then he should try to play on the queen side and use these pawns to make a passed pawn and gain advantage on the queen side. If he decides to keep the e5 pawn, then his mindset should be oriented towards the king side and the possible attack. Not clear which one is better, but I like the way Bacrot played. So first option, queen f4, protecting the e5 pawn. He didn't do that. He went for b4, protecting the c5 pawn. Okay, so black recaptures on e5, and now we have a forced sequence of moves. Bishop f4, queen e4, trade, trade, and rook a d1. So we are in some kind of an endgame. Maybe it's a middle game, but more like an endgame, where white has a big clump of pawns on the queen side that are threatening to make trouble for black. One more detail, why did white choose this rook and not the f1 rook? Because on this diagonal the bishop might create some tactical issues, so it's better to remove the rook from this diagonal and of course take temporary control of the open file. So black contests it as well, and now a very nice move, knight d4. So knight jumps in and it controls this square, so sometimes this might be possible, and also sometimes it might sneak into black's position like this. It all depends on what black does. So black chose bishop f6, and this creates a tactical opportunity for white, which is c6, a marvelous move. At first glance it looks illogical because you're just trading your great pawn for some pawn that didn't do anything, but actually this will allow white to get a position with the knight that is so dominant, and black has to take, because if he, for example, takes on d4, we have an intermezzo, and now black's position is collapsing. Everything is controlled here, and the rook is attacked, the bishop is attacked, sometimes there is a pin here. This is a totally busted position, so black has to take on c6, and we take back with the knight. So now we have this knight that is just a monster. It is just a monster. For example, rook is attacked, so if he moves, we support the knight with b5, and you will never dislodge this knight. And also there are ideas of attacking another pawn, pushing any of these guys, and this is just totally lost for black. So black chose to gain some time by trading, so he took on d1, white recaptured, and now black captured the pawn. So at this moment black is up a pawn, but these pawns that make the majority for black, they are not going anywhere. They need so much time to get into movement, while white's one pawn actually is gonna bind black completely on the queen side. Watch this. b5, so supporting the knight and also controlling this guy. And you can never move this guy. This a7 pawn can never move. If you, for example, go a6, we just go past you. And now, how will you stop this b pawn? There is no way. So, black attempted to transform the position into a rook endgame, where he was hoping for some drawing chances. But let's see how that ended. So e5, bishop e3, knight e6. This one cannot be defended anyway, because as I said before, if you push it, we just go past and no one is stopping this guy. So, okay, knight e6, bishop a7, and now bishop d4. So this is a move that forces a massive exchange on the d4 square. Let's observe it. Take, 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 take. And we have a rook endgame. And here, this is what Rapport was hoping for. Maybe he was hoping that Bacrot will play something like this, where he's a pawn up, but then black would go behind this passed pawn, and this position should be a draw. Even though white is a pawn up, the problem is that this rook is controlling the b pawn, and it's if black plays well, he should not lose this position. But Bacrot is an experienced player. Maybe he is not in his best years, but when it comes to experience, he has that, definitely. So he plays a beautiful move, rook b4. So he doesn't care about capturing the e4 pawn. He just wants to support his guy, and this is something that black has to worry a lot. Okay, so black tried f5, but now the b pawn starts marching. You have to go back, otherwise the queen will appear. And now what white achieved, he tied this rook to the defense of threats from promoting this pawn. And he plays one more excellent move, g5. So why is this move so good? First of all, it separates the h4 pawn from the other guys. Second of all, it fixes this pawn here and controls these two squares, so then the black king cannot really easily counterattack white's kingside. And later on there will be some tactical ideas where actually this pawn will try to deflect the black rook, but wait and see. It's too soon to explain that one. So black tries to activate his king, king f7, and now another beautiful move. So this is a very great technique, f3. The idea of this move is to open the fourth rank. It doesn't matter if black captures or pushes, it's virtually the same. Let's see what will happen, what actually happened. So e3, and now rook h4, abandoning the protection of this pawn, because if black takes it, white can use the awkward position of these pieces and just skewer black's king and rook. So that's why f3 was so important, to open up the fourth rank so that white can do this kind of tactic. So that's why black did not capture, because it loses instantly. So he removed the king. Now he threatens to capture, but we go back. We go back, we protect the pawn, and now we have the idea of sacrificing this guy and then deflecting this rook with the g pawn and finally promoting. Before we do that, we just need to block this pawn with the king. So this is what white does in the next few moves. You see, he improves his king. Rook was attacked, so it had to move. Black played f4, so he has a protected passed pawn, but that pawn isn't going anywhere, and the breakthrough is unstoppable. So let's observe king e2, king c4, h4. We prepare the breakthrough, so the king has to go back, and king c5, h5, the idea that I mentioned before, gh5, g6, king c6, g7. So the threat is here. For example, if black doesn't do anything, h4, gh, queen takes, promotes, takes, and this pawn isn't going anywhere because rook will easily control it. That's why here black played king c7, so now he is controlling this square, so white cannot push because then black can just capture, but white has a nice little move, rook c1 check, and you cannot capture here. If you do that, then the rooks will be traded by force and new queen will appear. Or in the game he played king d7, but then rook c8 ended the game because now no one is controlling this square, and the best black can do is to capture here, but that will actually lead to the same result. So as you can see, this was a beautiful gameplay by Etienne Bacrot, and he showed to the young guys that he can still fight. We'll see what will happen later on in the tournament, but for the first round he made a very good result by playing an instructive game. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, comment, share and like, and see you in the next video. Bye!